Russell Gagan here with another Russell's Fishing Tech Morning Buzz. I'm your host. Today we got a longtime friend and tournament director of Tournament Trail, Scotty Mack, coming in for a little conversation. Scotty, how you doing today?
Doing good, Russell. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. So, Scotty runs the Tournament Trail, as I said, which is a tournament circuit that travels around Lake Michigan. As of right this second, on the Michigan side, adding in Indiana, although over the years you have traveled to Wisconsin for numerous different events, including some that I've put on over the years in Sheboygan. I think we did Manitowoc a year or two, Sturgeon Bay quite a few years. So, you know, there's been some up and down the shoreline there. Why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit, maybe talk about, kind of how you got your start in tournament fishing, how long you've been doing it, stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I'm Scotty Mack. My dad is the one that got me started in this. My experience in tournament fishing is pretty limited, though I have extensive experience in running and managing tournaments. Captain Fred was a charter captain out of Manistee for 30 plus years. And really, when his knees started to give out and he developed ongoing battle with seasickness, he packed in his charter trips and traded it in for the Tournament Trail, and it was really him that got it started back in, I think, 2002, 2003. We approached, I think it was 8 the first year of the original tournaments, and just started bringing them together. The Tournament Trail magazine was born, and that's where the circuit started, and it's been going and growing ever since.
Yeah, so my first experience with Tournament Trail was in 2005 at the Manistee Splash, I believe it was, in July. I'll never forget that tournament. We traveled across the lake for that. We were super excited, and I think we did pretty well. We cashed. I want to say there was somewhere in the range of 80 to 90 boats, something like that, maybe. There's a lot. I know that.
Sounds about right for back in the day then, yeah.
Yeah.
Even old.
Yeah. I remember there was a giant thunderstorm on day 2. I've told this story many times. That was a really tough call for Fred. Looking back at it now and having the experience I have involved in tournaments, both fishing and, directing some, it was a very difficult call because the guys north of Manistee were okay. The guys south of Manistee were not, and we ended up all coming in early, but it was a tough touch and go deal. So, a lot of fun, but the point is it's been going on for a long time. You're talking upwards of 20 years, basically. And at one point, I think you guys were up to 17 or 18 events, maybe?
Yeah, I think the largest circuit that we ran was 18 events, and that was pretty much each and every week between Michigan City, Indiana. They kick it off every year. They're the longest running event on the trail, that Hoosier Coho Club Classic, now the Quake Coho Classic. That's first weekend in May, basically, and then we had events every weekend through Labor Day.
Yeah, that's a long stretch. I know I remember always you coming over on the ferry, and we were always, fairly early in the deal with the Salmon Cup there in June. But then when we started to do the Miesfelds, which was in July, you could see that the season was slowly starting to wear on as I would say, you guys were starting to get a little run down by the Miesfelds event for sure, but you had been going for a while. And I think those years that you had 18, I think that might have been some of the years that we might have had 2 in Sheboygan, to be honest. I don't remember that for sure, but I think so.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, we had 2 in Sheboygan, 1 in Sturgeon Bay. We did do Manitowoc for a couple of years. And yeah, it was quite the summer every year.
So let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the Tournament Trail, because I think it's pretty unique in the sense that there really is 2 different tournaments going on at pretty much every event slash port, which is very different from any
At least
other. At least two, yeah. Well, what I mean by it is the main event and the 333, I guess is what I'm getting at. I mean,
Sure.
there's different divisions and things like that, but there's basically a main event and a 333 at each individual port. And that's really different than any other type of tournament fishing that I've ever done as far as walleye or salmon anywhere else. Talk a little bit about what the 333 is, when that came about, and how that fits into the whole picture.
Well, the 333 is, you could probably call it a side bet and be accurate on the main, what we call host tournament. So the tournament trail is basically a marketing tool for the entire circuit of events that run up and down the Lake Michigan shoreline. And that, as I said, the first book I think came out in 2003. We did not have the 333 back then. And then after a couple of years, we thought we need to come up with, for lack of a better word, a gimmick to help promote teams to travel out of their comfort zones and to discover new ports and to experience new tournaments. So we came up with the 333, which is a low entry fee. It has consistent payouts that are split between cash and prizes, and they've grown significantly over the last couple of years. But it's something that really anyone can fish. So you only need to weigh 3 fish over the course of the 2-day tournament. Now, all the host events on the Lake Michigan Tournament Trail are run for 2 days. Some of them are Pro-Am, some of them are one division, some are no cull, some are, weigh your best so many fish. So the rules vary from port to port. And the one thing that the 333 offers is the ability to get out and take part in the tournament experience with a consistent set of rules. 333 rules are exactly the same wherever you fish. So whether you're in Michigan City or St. Joe in the south or up in Frankfort, Manistee in the north, 333 is always identical. And basically, it's a mix of skill and luck. You can weigh 3 fish over the 2 days, but once you commit to one of those fish, you're locked in. So if anything you weigh on day 1, you can't change on day number 2. And that's how the 333 works.
Yeah, I've always found it interesting and a lot of fun to sort of play that role of, do you roll the dice for day 2? Do you weigh some more on day 1? Obviously when it comes to strategy, there's a bunch of things involved. If you pre-fish, you got to kind of decide on day 1, was the fishing good? Or maybe, the lake was rough or whatever that might have caused, the fishing not to be as good as you expected it. What's the weather look like for day 2? Honestly, I can't remember anymore, Scott, but I would have to say I feel like I've probably fished north of 50 tournament trail events. I think that's probably a fair statement at this point. And
yeah,
I would say
sound ballpark, sure.
Yeah, and I would say that a handful of those, probably came down to a fact where if you weighed all 3 on day 1, that worked out for you. Most, you get some time on day 2. Maybe it's called early, maybe not. But I would say a handful of those, were a situation where the weather didn't look so hot on day 2. And if you were willing to roll the dice with 3 okay fish on day 1, you'd do pretty well. So as I kind of mentioned before, back in 2005 was my first experience. You had mentioned started in 02 or 03. Tournament trail's kind of plugging along. It's growing. You introduced this 333. And then what I think really took Tournament Trail to the next level is this monster marketing machine that comes along called Salmon Showdown. Now, why don't you talk for a minute about what Salmon Showdown is and what it was, and then maybe into what it is today. But in my opinion, that stretch in the 2000, whatever it was, 10 maybe to, 16, 17 time or whatever it was there, was the mecca of Tournament Trail.
Well, Salmon Showdown really was the culmination of the 333. We had been planning for years to try to get the fishery on TV because it really is a world-class fishery, and I don't know if it gets the credit that it deserves, and we're just trying to do our part to get the word out there that, holy cow, there's some really good fishing on Lake Michigan. So the 333, as we looked at it, we realized, this is a pretty good format, I think, for TV. It's clear, it's concise. We made a side pool, basically, of tournament teams that would compete for a side purse and be filmed throughout the entire season. We worked with Chase Mazer, who's behind the scenes on this little broadcast. And we did 7 years of Salmon Showdown, 91 episodes. It was a heck of a lot of work, but it was very well received. Every year, we would have teams attempting to qualify to get onto the show the following year. It was a $10,000 winner-take-all 333 rules event. And at most ports, we would load up 3 camera crews on 3 different teams and just track their progress all season long. It ran nationally for a few years. It ran regionally. And, we got viewership online from all over the world. So it was very successful. And then after season 7, I couldn't pay Chase enough to keep doing it. So we were both burnt out, to be honest with you. It was a lot of work. And so we let it go for a while, but now we're on the cusp of it coming back. We've already filmed 5 return episodes in 2022. Those are available for online viewing now at salmonshowdown.com. And our plan is to film 13 more episodes a full season in 2023.
Well, that's an exciting new announcement. I think there's been some rumblings about, you guys kind of did I don't know if you want to call it like a trial run or a kickoff this past season, which I thought was great. A little too short-lived in my opinion, but great. Seemed like I blinked my eyes twice and all the episodes were done, but definitely could see that it was bringing back some of that excitement and memories and just, the amount of people I can honestly say over the years that I've met, talked to, able to shake their hands at a sports show or even, just locally or whatever that said, hey, I watched you on Salmon Showdown. People pay attention to that stuff. And I feel like that's really been a benefit for salmon tournament fishing, is you guys being able to document it. And moving from 5 to 13 episodes is awesome. It's exciting. But again, I'm assuming it's going to be a lot of work. Is that right?
Well, it's a lot of work for Chase, and it's a little bit of work for me, and I'm very proud of the show. I was surprised after we stopped producing the show how long I was getting messages on Facebook and emails about when the show was coming back and, will it ever come back? And we also, we put them all those past episodes up on carbontv.com. And then I kind of let them go. I didn't really pay much attention to them. But when we started talking about bringing the show back, I went and checked that out. And in the viewership of the show, it stayed pretty much steady. People are watching it over and over again. They're passionate about it. And we're excited to bring it back to them. It will be a lot of work. But I think Chase and I have a really good chemistry and a really good ability to try to show off what it's like as best we can. In a half-hour show, which is really a 21-minute show when you factor in everything else. So there's, like you said, you blink and it seems like the show's done. And in a way, that's unfortunate, but also I think it speaks to how good the show is.
Absolutely. So one of the things that, I always thought was interesting were the rules surrounding the amount of events that you could fish when it came to like the points championship. Years ago when it came to Salmon Showdown, there's been a variance over the years in that deal, which is now called the Founders Cup, by the way. And I can understand the thought process why. Anybody that obviously knows me personally or you personally or whatever knows that, I've been friends with yourself and Fred for a long time. I know the new, owner of Tournament Trail well and have had some conversations with him, just discussing fishing, tournament fishing, all that. There's a lot of theories behind, do you let guys fish 10 events and count their best 3 to try to get more people fishing more events? Or does that actually hurt it because people that can't fish 10 events then don't participate because they can only fish a couple, which is probably what I'd say, the stature that I've always fallen into. Like it's difficult for me to really fish 3 or 4, but I could try to make that work. What is the plan for the up and coming year, if there is one, as far as the Founders Cup goes and Salmon Showdown goes? How many tournaments can you fish and what can you count?
Yeah, those are all good questions, and we have made a decision on that, which I'll be happy to share with you. You're right, it's varied over the years. What is now the Founders Cup has always been, in the past, referred to as 333 best overall, and we've tinkered and toyed with the rule set to try to make it as accessible and as appealing as possible to as many teams as possible. So last year we did make some changes, and I don't think they helped. I mean, I'm in the same boat with you. I think you've got to cap the amount of possibilities that you have to post a multi-port score. Otherwise, you favor a handful of boats that are out on the trail week in and week out, and there's only a few that can fish that often. We've been doing tournaments for 20 years. I've got data that would suggest that average team trail wide fishes 2 events, not 3, not 4, certainly not 10. So in the Founders Cup, you need to fish 3 to post a cumulative score. And if you can do that, then you'll be in line for a shot at a purse that's going to be over $20,000 with a top prize of $10,000 to the winning boat. But if you can't fish 3, it's really going to be hard to win unless everybody else tanks really hard, So that does make it a reach for the average team that maybe only fishes close to home. Maybe they do 1 or 2 events a year. But we'd like to make it enticing enough to get people to say, let's try to fish 3 this year. So is forgetting about last year where there was no cap on the amount of events you could fish. There will be a cap this year, and it will be 4. So you can fish a maximum of 4 events. You can also do 3 events. Your score will be the same. If you do fish the 4th, we'll automatically drop the lowest score. So that goes back to that aspect of the scoring system from 2 years ago. So a team that can get out there and fish 10 or 11 events will not have, you could argue they have a disadvantage, because when they go up to fish, they're going to have to decide based on their gut whether or not they want to count that score. All scores that you count have to be declared before you fish. You can't fish and then go, I want to use this one. You got to declare it before you fish. So in 2023, you'll be able to post 4 scores. We'll take the best 3, turn those into your cumulative score, and then see where the chips fall. Another change we made this year is we're bringing back port-by-port entry. So last year, it was a one-time $500 entry fee. And in the past, we had done it where you could pay as you go. So this year, it'll be $150 per port. You can fish up to 4. If you go port by port, your total entry, if you use all 4 ports, would be $600. If you can also register in advance for $500, and that gives you the option to use your 4th if you want. But I think what that does is, for those boats that you only fish maybe 2 events a year and want to decide whether they want to commit to a 3rd, you could pay $150 for your first event, and if you can only fish 3 and you tank on that, you're not committed to keep fishing. You save that extra $350. You don't have to throw that into the pot until you have to throw it into the pot. So I think that's another way that we're trying to reach out and say, give this a shot. It's 333 rules. It's 3 fish, and who knows? We had a fantastic champion last year, Matt Wing, Team Lacavia. His son and daughter, Katie and Luke, the only 3 members of that team. And they did fish a lot of events, but they're a solid team. They've won 333s in the past. And when the dust settled, it was their 25-foot boat that stood atop the pack.
No, that was definitely an impressive win, to say the least, for a father, daughter, and son team who aren't stacking the chips, with a bunch of talented captains or mates or buddies.
Correct. We see that a lot. We see a lot.
Yeah, well, I've been
captain team in the Founders Cup.
Yeah, I remember fishing on a vessel with 6 guys and 5 were captains, but me at the time, at the time, and I was the one driving the boat. So I've been there, done that. But no, that was an exciting ending. Obviously, Lenny and Mark Chimura, who's a friend of mine, had some opportunities there at the end. Yeah, captain team up. They had some opportunities at the end and just couldn't capitalize. Felt like they had the fish on at the end to win, but didn't work out, didn't stay hooked up. So I'm going to ask you a few tougher questions now. So be a little prepared here. These are going to be a little more difficult opinion questions, basically. So I've always, I like talking a lot about these subjects and just kind of thinking about like the years of tournament fishing. And I've spent a lot of time talking with your dad about this stuff, hours and hours, to be honest, just because I like to learn, and I think people at home want to know. One thing that I've always found interesting is rules seem to really come and go. And what I mean by that is I can remember when I first got into tournament fishing, there was a lot of events with no, or excuse me, when I first got into salmon tournament fishing, there were a lot of events with observers. I think even that Splash had an observer, if I remember right, at that time. And then we went through a cycle, I felt like, in the 2008 to 12 maybe range, or 15 range, where it seemed like there wasn't very many, just Ludington. And now I feel like maybe it's slowly kind of going back to some of that, although I did notice Ludington, first time I was in Ludington in many years, last year, and there was no observers, which was kind of a surprise to me. So talk a little bit about that. You've obviously experienced that. That's not always your call at the different events, but you're part of it. Talk a little bit about, the observer versus not observer format, how you feel about it, and kind of what your thoughts are on that whole scenario.
Yeah, that is a great question, and I do have thoughts on that whole scenario. But I will start by saying in Ludington, I think their original decision to not have observers was, and again, I can't speak for that committee. I'm not that committee, but I believe that was pandemic related. That's what started that whole thing off. But as far as the observer method of protecting the integrity of these events, I find it to be, and it's state prior to the pandemic, I find it to be pretty flawed. It is, meant to be a deterrent. It's meant to be something, again, to protect the integrity of the trail. But the problem is that you don't have, it's not equitably doled out team to team. These teams, some teams are stock full of pro fishermen. They're all good. They all know what they're doing. They all know what observers are for. Probably most of them don't want to spend their tournament weekend on a boat full of strangers. They want to help their team. So what we would find is some boats would get really good fishermen. Some boats would get really alert people that know why they're out there and understand what they're doing. Other boats would get observers who showed up for the $50 and a boat ride. And in some regard, there's not a lot to do if you observe unless something happens. And that might not be something that is intentional or meant to be cheating or anything. I mean, there are responsibilities that observers have to understand and look out for the whole day. And it's really hard to take a tournament with 30 pro boats and come up with 30 qualified people that are going to use that responsibility in the same way and apply it in the same way to each boat. So in that essence, I think the observer system is a bit flawed, and I do think we've seen it change and evolve over the last couple of seasons, where there's been a movement to basically just look at the last year's result, and maybe a tournament will elect to take, or we're going to put observers in 2023 on the top 5 boats from the pro division in 2022. And they're going to be hand-selected observers by that tournament committee. So you are at least trying to ensure that every observer is of the same skill level and understanding and is going to handle it with the responsibility that it deserves. And then on day 2 of that tournament, you take those same observers and you put them on the 5 boats that are at the top of the leaderboard. So nobody really knows if they're going to get an observer or not. And I think that is enough to deter any shady dealings going on, or at least I hope it is. We've had a lot of, limelight problems with tournament fishery, like with Loot, what happened on the walleye circuit. And, the reality is, 99.9% of the people are, they're legitimate. They have integrity. They don't want to cheat. But on the other hand, you keep running the numbers, somebody tries something fishy, and it really puts a black eye on it for everybody. And so we're always looking for ways to keep the tournaments fair. And we ask the teams themselves, just like you always hear, if you see something, say something, and we want to know about it. But we've been pretty blessed on the trail, I think, to not really have any. And I'm not going to say we're free of controversy, but it's been minimal, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a conversation with you specifically, so I'm going to put words in your mouth here, and if I'm wrong, you can say that. But I remember a conversation with you a few years back, and you and I were discussing there was some shallow waters concerns for the Sheboygan tournament by our dock, and we were kind of discussing just the whole cooler check in the morning. Obviously we need to get those coolers in when they're going to weigh in, but this whole cooler check idea, and I believe it was you. So I'm going to give you credit for something here, because I'm pretty sure it was you that said to me in the old tournament trail trailer, the motorhome, I think at that time yet, I think you told me, quote unquote, I don't think I've ever had anybody pull up and hold their cooler up with a 20-pound king in it. And, that really registered to me big time, which was, because I was trying to do the same thing, right? As I think any tournament director / person involved in a tournament, whatever it is, which is hold up the integrity of the event. It really rang with me that if somebody wants to, cheat and have a couple of 20-pound kings on board, if you're going to have a cooler check in the morning, they're probably not going to put them in their cooler, hold up that cooler and, give you a thumbs up, letting you know as you go by that, hey, I got these big kings in my cooler. What do you think? They're probably going to hide them somewhere else. So in that same conversation or same comment, years prior, I had conversations with Fred as we had kind of got the Salmon Cup going and things like that about pro-am, the rules, how many fish. And I'll never forget this night. It was like 8, 9 o'clock, about 8 o'clock at night, probably at the Grand Rapids show. Fred and I are sitting on a bench talking, and he told me, he said, the one of the biggest lessons I learned in how many years of running this tournament trail thing is the more rules you put on, the less people fish. This is supposed to be fun. And he said, we want it to be a fishing competition, but if you make it into too much of a fishing competition, you start to lose interest.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, and I will like to go back to what you were saying about the cooler checks. I think Chase can vouch for this as well. We in Sheboygan, certainly no offense meant, but we certainly made jokes every time that I had to get up at 4 a.m. to go stand on the launch docks and have people hold up their coolers. And our ongoing joke was, here's my empty cooler, but I'm standing knee deep in 20-pound kings, and you can't see them, over the gunnel from your viewpoint. But in that, of course, it's just a joke. I do think there's some value in that cooler check, and that is you're requiring somebody to look in my eyes or your eyes and lie directly to you. So if somebody's going to cheat, they're probably going to do that anyway. But if somebody's on the border, they might go, you know what? No, I'm not going to stand here and shout out, over the lake. So I mean, maybe there's some deterrence there. But yeah, too many rules, not a good thing. On the other hand, there's people that want more rules. But I think in a nutshell, the more simple you can make it, the better it is to bring more people in. Because you've got to think that, there's people like yourself that's fished over 50 tournaments. There's teams that are out there week in and week out, fishing 10, 11 tournaments a year. And we appreciate them, but they're always there. If you want the tournaments to grow, you need to make them welcoming, and you need to make people feel like they're not going to go and just get their butts kicked immediately. Like, they've got a chance to compete, and they're not walking on eggshells, making sure they don't break a rule, unintentionally. So there's a lot to say about that. And actually, Fred spearheaded a long and I guess honestly failed attempt to unify the rules trail wide. Like I mentioned earlier when we were talking, the tournament rules from the host tournaments vary port by port by port. His goal was always to make it one simple set of rules circuit wide. But I think there are too many challenges to that. The fisheries change from port to port during the season, and So, I don't know if you'll ever see one universal rule set, but I do agree. The harder you make it, even now, the some rules pages are 2, 3, 4 pages long. It's if you've never done it before, it's pretty intimidating.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about the state of the fishery. So obviously you've been participating since the early 2000s. That definitely has been a long period of time, and we've seen ups and downs in the fishery. How do you feel about where the fishery is at now? I mean, I think it's pretty public at this point that the DNR, the Michigan DNR, has agreed to put more salmon into the lake. The Wisconsin DNR has already been putting more salmon into the lake. Maybe talk for just a few minutes about like what you saw on the trail last year, and then just kind of, from what you're hearing and seeing yourself, where do you see that going forward over the next few years?
Well, I mean, I hope it's positive. I think more fish, is a positive thing. It was a fairly controversial for a year. You got I think the alewife, we're seeing them come back, and I don't know that I can diagnose what exactly caused their problems, but I tend to think, if you go back to like, I think it was 2012, 2013, when the lake froze over like 98% 2 years in a row. I can't believe that helped, and that seemed to follow the dip. But now, people are seeing the bait out there, and I think that warrants an increase in fish plants. And I think that can only help things. The fishing on the trail, at least what I see, has been sporadic. But there's big, healthy kings, and people get them every week. It's kind of always that give or take, I guess. Do you want to go out and get a box full of 12 to 16 pound kings, or do you want to go out and have a shot at a 34 pound king every once in a while? It's hard to get both of those in the same fishery, but I don't know. I feel good about the fishery. I mean, I'm putting the new book together today, I've been putting it together for months, but there's a lot of nice big fish caught, and at every port. Not everybody's getting them, but it is fishing,
Yeah, I mean, but in theory, you've seen this for a long time now. You've seen the numbers come through. You've seen the size come through. I mean, do you feel good about what you saw last year on the trail? I mean, I think fishing's been sporadic, no matter if you went back to 2005 or if you talk about this year. But overall, do you feel good, or are you a little nervous about what the future holds? Because there was a point where I think we could all say we were probably nervous.
Yeah. I don't feel nervous. I think the fishery is coming back. I think it's going to continue to improve. I mean, that's what I feel. That's what I think. The numbers that I look at, how I interpret them, I think we're on an upward trajectory. Do you disagree with that?
No, I think we are on an uphill trajectory, and I actually have made the statement multiple times. I thought this was the best king year I've seen on Lake Michigan in probably close to 10 years. Xing out 2012, which was an anomaly. And my projection is the next 3 to 5. It was, yeah. The next 3 to 5 years is going to be some of the best fishing we've seen in a long time.
Well, I hope you're right, and I feel the same. I mean, I don't know how good it's going to be, but I do think that things are looking good as we head into the future, and I think that can only bring more people, whether they're fishing the tournament trail or not, just get more people out on the lake and enjoying the resource, because like I think I said earlier, I say it's a world-class fishery, but it's not like I've been around the world to really have the experience, but I got to think it can hold its own for sure. I mean, I don't know where else you can go and, get, you can get bigger kings probably in Alaska, but I don't think you can get 5 of them a day. So.
How were the statistics on the trail last year as far as participation? Were you about status quo? Were you down a little, up a little?
Actually right now, I don't even remember, but I would say flat. I mean, that's, it was, I mean, across the entire year, I think it was within 10 or 12 boats. And I don't even remember if it was up or down, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's been plateaued, I would say. And then, we've got to change it, because we did, we made a tough choice a couple of years ago to let go of a few tournaments. We had debated for quite some time that, we mentioned for a while we had 18 tournaments. And for a while they were all healthy, but then it started to feel to me like as the tournaments plateaued or even shrank a little bit, maybe some of these are cannibalizing each other. So we cut the circuit down, and it was a tough choice. But I think that's better. I think we've already seen in participation that it has helped, and I think it's better for the circuit itself. I think it's better for the sponsors that support it. I think it's better for the teams that participate. 11 tournaments, still a lot of tournaments. And if you can have 11 massive tournaments as opposed to 18 average tournaments, I'd rather have 11 massive tournaments and have 7 weeks off during the summer.
Well, I have to admit, we were one of those cuts. And when I say we, I'm talking Sheboygan. So talking Wisconsin for just a second, it was kind of a surprise, to be just brutally honest, to the folks at home, that when I got the phone call that you guys were going to cut Sheboygan, because we were coming off of the best year we have ever had for participation. But obviously, there was other reasons why. Maybe you can explain that for a second. And then the second part of that question would be, do you think there's ever any potential chance of Tournament Trail coming back to Wisconsin in any way? And really, what would that take to do something like that?
Well, yeah, we can talk about all that stuff. So it was a very difficult choice. And, I'll start by saying I have very fond memories of the Sheboygan Salmon Cup, and it hasn't really been that long ago. But, I do recall at the award ceremony, most years, I think I would say something along the lines of, you guys, I really love coming here. It just feels we're just so welcomed over there. And that's not, that wasn't like a line of crap, like in Spinal Tap where they're like, hello, Cleveland, and he's in LA or whatever. It really was a different feeling over there. And everyone that fished seemed to enjoy it so much. And I do miss going over there. That's the truth. But what's changed, what led to that decision was part of what I said. It was too many tournaments. Like I said earlier, average boat fishes maybe 2 tournaments a year. We decided to try to increase participation on the trail to focus more on that Founders Cup, on that multi-port. And it's been a long time since we've had 3 events over in Wisconsin. But we poured a lot of money. Those payouts are fantastic in the Founders Cup. We tripled the payouts in the 333. And all that is to entice people to get out of their comfort zones, grab the team, and visit a neighboring port and have some fun, and make yourself a better fisherman by doing it. So that's what the Founders Cup is all about. So to take our resources and head over there, for 2 days a year for one tournament, it just didn't quite fit that new strategy that we had, and that's why we had to make that call. And it was difficult. You've mentioned the Salmon Splash 2 or 3 times since we've been talking. That's another tournament that we cut. That's one that my father started. I don't even know how long ago. That was a hard call to make. And we said farewell to our friends in Traverse City as well. And it really, Traverse City and Sheboygan, it was almost easier to make that call because there was so little cross participation. Traverse City was almost like its own group of boats, and they'd show up and they'd loved having us there. Sheboygan was the same thing, but every once in a while we'd see a couple boats come across the lake and fish over there from Michigan, and it wasn't really fair to Sheboygan because for them to take part in the multi-port, they got to come across the lake twice, and fish in unfamiliar territory, and it just wasn't working. So that's why we made that call. As to whether or not we'd ever come back there, I would love to come back there. I do truly miss it. I mean, I meant what I said at those award ceremonies. It really is a different feeling over there. It was almost like a vacation while I was working. But we probably need to set up some type of West Side circuit that would allow us to come over there and give those, Wisconsin anglers a chance to compete in the best overall. So would we ever come back there? Maybe, but I think we'd probably need to have three events to make it happen. Which in a way, that's even better, I suppose. If we can get it done.
Well, and the interesting part, and I think you and I have talked about this, and I know I've talked about this with literally probably hundreds of anglers around the Great Lakes, is there's definitely a different feeling about quote unquote tournament fishing, or I actually would call it competitive fishing, because there's two types. The Wisconsin side has always, in my opinion, been the derby side. Derbies are big on our side of the lake. We have, I think, what is maybe the biggest derby on all the Great Lakes, Salmonorama. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize, but I think it is. We have another really big derby called the KD Derby in Sheboygan for many, many years. The Coho Derby was a big deal. Almost each and every port, if not each and every port, has its own derby even to this day. Port Washington has the Lions Derby, Manitowoc, Two Rivers, and so on. But tournaments have never really caught on big on the Wisconsin side of Lake Michigan. The Salmon Cup had grown. Miesfeld's had some decent years. There's a group up in Kewaunee, the Blue Door, that runs some tournaments, and they've had success. As you mentioned earlier, Sturgeon Bay has kind of come and gone. Manitowoc came and gone. There's some tournaments on the south end of the lake. The Bruce City maybe would be the one major tournament, I would say, that gets some, really big numbers of boats year in and year out. But tournament fishing, so to say, is that terminology, just doesn't seem like it's taken hold on the Wisconsin side as much as it has the Michigan side. And vice versa, you flip-flop, I would say derby fishing hasn't really taken hold on the Michigan side like it has the Wisconsin side. Any thoughts on why that maybe is, or what the theory is there?
I have no idea. I really have no idea, but I think you're absolutely right. It's almost like a mirror image. I mean, there are derbies over here, but it's the opposite. I mean, it seems like the tournaments are preferred over here, and we always felt that from the beginning when we came over to Wisconsin. We would see these derbies getting hundreds and hundreds of entries, and then the tournaments, would get maybe 30 boats, 40 boats. I think you had a good year at the Salmon Cup last year, but again, it was year after year. It was the same core group of people that enjoyed that tournament experience. And I'm sure they're fishing derbies too, but for some reason it doesn't translate. I have no idea why. Maybe it's the structure. Maybe you guys are just more laid back. You're like, well, I don't want nobody telling me when I want to go to fish. I'll go out and fish whenever I want. And then if I catch one, I'll weigh it. I have no idea, but it's a stark contrast between the two. I do agree with that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's always kind of been in the back of my mind. I blame it on the beer tents. I really do. I think it's all the beer tents' faults. The beer tents at the derbies, they just win in Wisconsin. They don't seem to win in Michigan as much, but I mean, maybe that's because the Packers are better than the Lions. I don't know. I mean, it could be any of those things. But
we'll see. We'll see pretty soon. I mean, let's just look forward. Let's not look back. It could be a whole new era this weekend. Well, you guys
could 100%
Seahawks. But we'll see.
I'm just teasing a little bit about the Packers and Lions deal, but in theory, I think honestly, I do think it's a mentality thing, and it's not a negative either way. I think I think a lot of it honestly has a lot to do with one particular individual, and I have to be truthful, and I think it's Fred. I think Fred got turned.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Lions still. I was going to say Dan Gamble.
Sorry. Well, I like Dan Gamble too, but yeah. Fred, I think back in the day might have chewed your kneecap off too if you weren't careful, but
yeah. And he could have a lot to do with that culture of tournaments here, because he was instrumental in starting them and bringing them together, and I think presenting them as the whole being bigger than the sum of its parts. And he did not start those tournaments, but those 8 tournaments that trusted in him to become a marketing vehicle for that circuit, that's what started it, and it was his hard work that really started the trajectory that now I'm attempting to carry on as best I can. But yeah, I mean that could have had a lot to do with it.
Well, it's exciting stuff. So basically, to recap, Tournament Trail is going to film, you said 13 episodes? of the Salmon
Yes.
Showdown is the plan? And you said 11 events. So is there multiple episodes for a couple of events then, or is there going to be more events in 2023?
Well, no, it'll probably be a couple of 2-part episodes would be the simplest way to handle that. And we'll probably, if I had to guess, I would say they would be later in the year when we have more scores and a better idea of who the final teams are going to be in contention. But who knows? We'll play it by ear. We'll have camera crews out every week, and if something warrants, double the amount of coverage, we have the ability to do that, at least twice next year. So, yeah, it'll be 13 episodes filmed at 11 tournaments. However that's divvied out, we'll let the content of the show decide.
Let everybody at home know where they can find both the Tournament Trail and Salmon Showdown.
Sure. Tournament Trail, if you're looking for information on the upcoming year or even the past years, the hub for the entire circuit is tournamenttrail.net. On that website, you'll find schedules, you'll find basic information, and you'll also find a specific page for each tournament that makes up the circuit. And on that page, all the tournaments have their own website, so it's a great way to get wherever you need to go for anything related to tournament fishing. For the TV show, salmonshowdown.com is where you can go to find, you find everything that has to do with Salmon Showdown. You'll find the 5 episodes we filmed in 2022. They're all available for online viewing now. They've had their broadcast run, and they're right there on salmonshowdown.com. You'll also find a link to Carbon TV, where if you want to binge watch 91 episodes of Chase and my show, you're welcome to do so. All of that is available at salmonshowdown.com, and we're looking forward to increasing that with season 9 in 2023.
Well, if they want to see my ugly mug, I think they'd have to go back a few years, but they could probably find it somewhere on Salmon Showdown's website.
Not hard to find Russell on Salmon Showdown. That is for sure. I don't know who was on the most, but you were probably right up there. Maybe Tim Pratchler and Verdict 3. They were on an awful lot. But yeah, there's a lot of great stuff that went down in the first 7 seasons of Salmon Showdown. So I invite everybody to check it out. You can, again, salmonshowdown.com is the easiest place to go find everything that has to do with the show.
Well, I sure appreciate you coming on today. Scotty Mack from Tournament Trails, sort of a legendary name in tournament fishing, to be honest with you. You've been running tournaments with your dad and by yourself for a long time. You laugh, but I'm actually being serious. I mean, there's very few people that fish tournaments on Lake Michigan and even on Lake Ontario at this point that doesn't know the name Scotty Mack. You got a legendary voice and a legendary name. I appreciate you sitting down with the Morning Buzz with Russell's Fishing Tech, coming to you again at another week. I'm not sure who I'll have next week, but they're going to have to follow Scotty Mack's lead, and that's going to be tough to do. I guess for Scotty Mack, it's going to be Go Lions. For all my Wisconsin fans, it's going to be Go Packers on Sunday. So good luck to all the teams, and good luck to everybody who's going to get out fishing this year on the tournament trail. Thanks again.
Thank you, Russell.